The following is a local resident producer's program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz, your host, and very happy tonight to be welcoming back a guest who we've had on several times in the course of his years as police chief here in Oshkosh. But Scott Greuel, chief of Oshkosh Police, is here with us tonight. So we're going to be talking about all kinds of things, including his impending retirement. So welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for having me back.
Sure. It's always a pleasure. And I keep thinking for some reason that we were going to do this a few weeks ago, and then we had to cancel, but no, that was something else we had to cancel that we'll talk about later. But so anyway, yeah, I do want to talk about your retirement later on a little bit, but a couple things that I want to talk about first. And you know, I think we live in a relatively safe community. You know, by comparison, we have, I think, a pretty low crime rate and so forth. And I think that's in part due to the type of people we have living here, and certainly a credit to your department too. But we have had a couple things lately that have sort of popped up, and they're out of character for the city of Oshkosh. It's not that they've never happened, but they don't happen very often. And I know that they're under investigation, so you're kind of restricted as to what you can say. But the first one just happened this week, where a gentleman was found with a gunshot wound to the head. Is that correct?
Right.
What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can't talk a lot about the details, but let me just say you're right in your kind of characterization of Oshkosh. We do live in a very safe community, but we're not immune from these kinds of things. And although it's not an everyday occurrence, when they do happen, I mean, it raises the anxiety level of our community, rightfully so. And so we try to do the best we can to assure our citizens that we are on it and we're doing whatever we can to find who is responsible. So unfortunately, yes, we did have an incident the other day where someone was found in his vehicle and it sustained a gunshot wound to the head. And we set things in motion from an investigative perspective to try and talk to as many people as we can to find out what happened. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to catch this person yet. So, you know, I just want to assure the community that we're working very hard on it. No reason to believe it's not an isolated incident. We believe it is. And we don't think there is necessarily any ongoing threat, although what I would like to say is just a reminder that every day, I mean, citizens should be vigilant, you know, for personal safety. And anytime we're engaged in, you know, risky behavior and a certain alcohol intoxication level in an area that's maybe a little more high risk, we need to take precautions. We talk about buddy systems and, you know, staying where it's lit and, you know, not being argumentative with people and you know, move in groups and those kinds of things. But rest assured, we're working very hard. Hopefully by the time this airs, whenever that is, that we will have already released that we've got somebody in custody. The times that we do have these violent crimes, which is at a very low rate in Oshkosh. I hope our community also recognizes that we find these people, make arrests, and hold them accountable at a very high level, higher than the national average, higher than the state average. So, you know, I know it's concerning to people when they hear about violent crimes happening, but I also think it's important that we usually find these people and take them into custody.
Okay. So you mentioned when the show is going to air. It will start airing on local cable a week from this coming, well, it'll air this coming Tuesday.
Okay.
I will have it uploaded on YouTube probably later tonight or tomorrow. So that would be great if you could catch someone later tonight. But
we work fast. Hopefully we can work that fast.
But yeah, hopefully by the time next week rolls around, this person will be in custody. But the main thing for people to know is you believe it's an isolated thing, not just some random act of violence.
Yeah, we of course don't know that for sure,
right,
until we've had an opportunity to fully talk to the victim and anybody that we take into custody as a result of that. So the actual motives, we're not sure. So you know, I don't want to be too definitive on that. Again, the word of caution to citizens: there's some things that you can do to protect yourself. And you know, you see anything suspicious, you know, get on your phone and call 911 and get us going. But there's no reason to believe that this is any more than a one-time event. Of course, we're going to be very vigilant in the high-risk areas that we know are frequented by, you know, people that are heavily intoxicated. You know, I guess a message here, and I'm not saying that this is the case with the victim, but we saw it pub crawl night as well, that binge drinking that results in high levels of intoxication, being in an area that high-risk behavior happens, there's a likelihood of victimization, and but there are some things you can do to prevent it.
Okay. Well, before we move on then, why don't we talk about some of those things? I mean, you said one for sure is, you know, move in groups, travel in a pack, if you will. And I think that's always, even if it's just one person, you know, your likelihood of being raped, robbed, molested, whatever, or abducted. You know, we hear about so many of those happening these days, not around here, of course, but all you have to do is turn on the TV or look on the internet and you can see these things happening. Excuse me, and so your likelihood of getting abducted is probably, I don't know, what's the percentage if you're traveling, walking with someone or in a car with someone? Is it 50% better if you're with one other person?
I don't know that you can put a statistic on it, but the more aware you are of your surroundings and take precautions, don't walk around with your cell phone in your hand, keep it protected, but have it ready if you need to report something. Just be around it, be aware of your surrounding, and of course, when you have impaired judgment through the use of drugs or alcohol, your chances are more likely of being victimized if it is obvious to an attacker that you're not in control. And so, but there are some things that you can do, you know, as we mentioned, to protect yourself as well.
You talk about cell phones, and you've seen it, I'm sure. I see it all the time, especially around the college campus or around high schools. Kids who are walking around, they've usually got earbuds in, or they're just looking at their phone, they're busy texting or whatever. They're not paying attention to what's around them. And what an easy target they're making themselves out to be, because they're not listening necessarily. They're not paying attention. I mean, you can not have earbuds in and be so caught up in something that you're looking at on your phone that everything else is just, you know, in the far background, and you don't have a clue what's going on. And you're a very easy target when you do that.
Yeah, and unfortunately, smartphones are a hot item for theft, and so, you know, carrying it around openly, being vulnerable, there's that opportunity of being assaulted to take your phone. But, I mean, we've all seen videos on YouTube or on some of those reality shows where people walk into things, almost get hit by vehicles because they're just not paying attention to where they're
Right,
going.
yeah. So it's a safety thing from
Right.
all perspectives.
Absolutely.
As we both sit here with our cell phones out on the table, but I think we're safe here. And you've got your gun, so I feel better about that. The other incident was a homicide that we had, and ironically enough, you and I spoke pretty early that morning because I volunteer with a racial diversity, racial literacy group called Fit Oshkosh, and we had organized and arranged for a basketball game that day with a lot of the minority youth in the community and the police department.
Right.
And so I get this early morning call from you saying we got an urgent situation on our hands. So that's not a good way to start a Sunday for either one of us. But it was a homicide in the city, and it consumed all of your resources, including your CSOs, community service officers. That was another situation where we don't have a whole lot of homicides here, and it was a domestic abuse type situation, allegedly, and the man who allegedly shot the woman to death, was her boyfriend. And so he was caught very quickly within, 5 hours, 4 hours, something like that?
It was about 11 hours after the incident.
11 hours, okay. Well, I was off on that one. But, and that I know is in the court systems right now. He just entered a not guilty plea a week or so ago, and so we'll see how that plays out. But is there anything that you can tell us about that particular incident without compromising anything?
I can't talk a lot about it. I mean,
Sure.
obviously, we have to let the court system play the course of the system. But I will say it underscores the importance of the problems and concerns with domestic violence in our community. And fortunately, we have not had a lot of these kinds of incidents, at least recently. I mean, there was a period of time when it was a little more common, and I don't have an explanation for that, but it brings back to mind in the area of domestic violence how that has changed over the course of my career. And when I first became a police officer, it was considered more of a private matter, and the frustration of law enforcement that we had was going back to the same houses and seeing the abuse take place, and law enforcement was basically hand-tied on how to resolve those kinds of things. And you do what you can, and most time the female was the one victimized, to help them out of that very damaging relationship. To very early on it being considered and changed in this state and around the country, appropriately so, of being thought of differently as not a private matter, but of a crime against the state, so to speak, a criminal activity. And how we have so many more tools now to deal with domestic violence and the mandatory arrest and those kinds of things. So when we have domestic incidents occurring, how we can inject ourselves sooner, and we want citizens to be observant to those things and report it, to save lives and those kinds of things. Unfortunately, we had the incident that had a domestic tone to it, and how tragic those things are, in our community. As far as specifics of it, I really can't get into it. You're right in that it was very manpower intensive, and the community was very helpful. That's I think the underscores the support that we get in our community, and that when we put those things out that we're looking for someone, we get oftentimes a lot of help. And being part of that investigation, it was also, as tragic as it was neat to see all of my people in place doing the things that they needed to do, and it all was resolved quicker than we maybe even anticipated by taking him into custody without incident 11 hours later. So now it's up, to the justice system to hold them accountable to that, and of course we hope that happens. But just a tragic incident.
Well, it is, and in that particular case, I know that you can't talk about the other one because you don't know if the weapon was registered or not, I suppose. But in this particular domestic abuse, domestic violence situation, was the weapon involved, can you say, one that was registered?
I don't know that and couldn't say if I did. Those kinds of facts are best left for court at some point. Inquiring minds probably can get at that, but it would be irresponsible for me to give that kind of detail right now.
I'm just trying to, sort of create a picture here as to, we've got concealed carry now.
Right.
And, did we have a weapon that was legitimately registered? Did this person have a right to have the handgun that they had? But I understand and I appreciate that. But let's talk about concealed carry for a little bit because, it's been in place now for, I think, 2 years, something like that. Yeah. Have you seen things change for the better, the worse, or not really so much at all since that's become a law?
A little bit of both, and I'll kind of try and explain myself. I mean, I certainly believe in the Second Amendment and people's right to bear arms. My fear as a police chief, though, is that those things are not used appropriately. I'll tie this into where I think some of the root causes of crime and disorder in our community and what really taxes our services is addiction, drug and alcohol addiction, mental illness, poverty. And I think when you mix drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and mental illness with firearms, it's a recipe for disaster. And though I think there is legislation that's trying to decipher through those things and work through those things to make sure that those that have known mental illnesses aren't acquiring weapons legally, we all know that sometimes on the street you can get things, or through theft you can get things that will get into the wrong hands. One of the fears that I had was that I thought there'd be a proliferation of guns, and we certainly see more people in our interactions in the community that are armed. Of course, the majority of them are very responsible and are doing so legally and are behaving, and when we approach them, admit that they're carrying and everything is fine. But we've also had incidences that maybe if the mindset wasn't so much that now it's okay, legally permissible to carry, they're making otherwise irrational decisions about using drugs or alcohol while they're carrying, or being in places like a tavern while they're carrying.
Which is illegal, right?
Which is illegal. Okay. And the fear that disputes, which would normally be handled very civilly with disagreement, maybe verbally between two adults, now where weapons are displayed. And we certainly have had those incidents. The other fear that I've had, and it has come true, is that we become so relaxed in our gun ownership that we're careless on where we're storing these, both in the home and outside of the home. And there's tragedies all across this country where weapons aren't locked away appropriately and kids get a hold of them. And I think there's more of a proliferation of guns. I think Wisconsin's always been a gun ownership state. We're ripe in our history with hunting and those kinds of things. But one of the fears is that we become so complacent, that in particular they will not be stored properly in vehicles. And so we've seen guns being stolen out of cars because it's just so common now for people to be with their firearms. So my fear is that these things continue, and that we may have more heat of the passion kind of crimes occur because there are more guns out there.
Sure. You mentioned pub crawl and people being incapacitated a little bit with their faculties. How has pub crawl been over the course of the years? Has it become a little bit better in the last year or two, or do we still have sort of a mammoth problem on our hands?
We have a problem. There's a huge binge drinking mentality, not just on college campuses, but I think with our youth not just in this community, but all around. And it is more prevalent on college campuses. But although we have seen some of the maybe attendance of visibly identified pub crawlers go down, we still have enormous problems. And let me kind of frame that for you maybe a little bit. I think we've got some very good countermeasures in place downtown that have mitigated and minimized some of the problems with people getting hit by cars, or the presence of officers taking kind of a strict enforcement approach, dealing with quality of life issues and things like that, that there's almost an expectation that law enforcement is not going to tolerate much downtown. And we've gotten a certain level of cooperation from tavern owners and the bouncers that have maintained some control measures inside, where some of the early disorderly behavior that we saw in pub crawl from 2-3 years ago isn't necessarily occurring now. So I think some of those countermeasures are working. What we saw in April of this year during the spring pub crawl was kind of an offshoot in the university area. It was pub crawl related, but unfortunately Oshkosh has gained a reputation that the second week in April, second week in October, it's party time. And we had at least 54 house parties pop up last April in the university area that was very heavily attended, and thousands of people were, fortunately for us, not really intent on causing damage or fighting. They were doing a lot of drinking and consuming, and that's where the binge drinking activity comes in, that always causes problems later in night as the intoxication level goes up. But we had a little more difficulty controlling that and keeping the rest of the motoring public safe, and we had people up on houses, on top of the roofs, on balconies, where there was a real fear because of the intoxication level that we would have a tragedy occur. Since that time, we have, since last April, we've put in a number of very proactive things that we've done, including our outreach to the university, which we partnered with them to do some things internally, like locking down the dorms during the weekend, and the relationship with internal accountability through the Dean of Students office there, and the Dean's, the Vice Chancellor's office. We've reached out to a number of landlords. We proactively reached out to the students to educate them on the consequences of it. And just a lot of outreach by our District 1 officers, letters that went to various addresses warning them of consequences of misbehavior. We spent the entire month of September with some special details and a strict enforcement where there was a heavy presence of officers in the university area. And all those things helped, to a certain extent, minimize the potential harm for last weekend's pub crawl. And although we saw not thousands, but hundreds of people out and about, and we made at least 101 citations that were issued because of various quality of life violations, we didn't see necessarily the level of intoxication. We certainly didn't see the poor judgment behavior as a result of high intoxication by the sitting on top of homes and all those kinds of things. So a small victory, I think, but still a long way to go to what I hope finally amounts to that, it's just not fun to come here anymore to do that because of the potential harm. Sure.
There is a, I don't know if you're familiar with this or not, there's a young man in town who graduated from the university, a year or two or so ago. He has started a group, and I'm spacing out on the name here, but
Jake White, Party.0.
Yes,
yeah.
Party.0,
yeah.
Yes, and they organize house parties that are totally sober.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of fun things, and it's a way for kids to get together, socialize, and party, but party alcohol and drug-free.
Right.
And I've met him, at a Kiwanis meeting about maybe 3 or 4 months ago, I think, and was just very impressed with him, and want to get him on the show. We just haven't been able to get our schedules together. But he's really doing some good work with this group.
He really is. He's got an ambitious goal and an ambitious agenda, and one that I hope really takes hold throughout university systems, in particular across this country and in this state. I've met with him and talked with him, and I believe in his vision. He's guided now by a board of directors, and they're starting to funnel some seed money to him through the foundation and some other areas that are helping him with his cause. I absolutely support what he's doing. I think he's had some, real successes in the last couple of weeks, and his group has taken over a home that previously was a problem house for us off campus, and so, we're not really concerned about those same things. And you're right, he's exactly showing that you can do the same things and have fun. There just doesn't have to be alcohol and drugs involved.
Right.
And part of his message is college students just want to go out and meet people and meet friends and make new friends. And he's given them an avenue to do that without the harmful drugs or alcohol involved.
Yeah, and so if anyone's interested in that, it's, I believe the website address is party.o, as in the number O, .org, I think. But if you just, if that's not it, I apologize, and you can just do a search for it, and I'm sure it'll come up. Or write us at our website, and I'll get you the information, because I do have his card at home. And he's so ambitious, and I'm sure you know this, that he's looking to branch out in other cities.
Yeah.
And actually has already started. So I don't know how one guy can have so much ambition, but thank God he's young.
If I'm not mistaken, I think he's even had some outreach in the state of Oregon at some university there.
And possibly
so,
Minnesota
yeah.
also. He gave a little speech at this Kiwanis meeting, and I think you're right, Oregon was part of it, and I'm pretty sure that he said something about Minnesota, but I could be wrong on that. But he is in a few different communities in the state of Wisconsin too. So, so it's good to see that pub crawl is, maybe improved somewhat in the last 6 months. But, what can be done, if anything, to just do away with this altogether? Or is it just sort of a beast that's taken on a life of its own, that if it's not going to be something organized and supported by the bars, the kids are going to do it on their own?
I think unfortunately you're right. I certainly, if I had the magic pill to make that go away, I would. I'm absolutely against binge drinking and all the potential harm that comes from that. But I think it's a bigger issue. It's a community issue. It's not necessarily just a university, just a police department issue. It's a society issue, and the love affair that we have, especially in this state, with alcohol abuse, and so it's a collaborative approach that's needed to to try and end or change that culture. In the meantime, we're going to keep chipping away from the tools and the resources that we have available to us to just say, you know what, we're going to be there, and there's going to be consequences for quality of life problems that happen that are disruptive to the neighborhoods. And it was kind of interesting during the initial hours of the university activity. We were monitoring various social media sites, and they were referring to this as being the cop crawl, not the pub crawl, because we outnumber the partiers at one point. So, that kind of response is going to continue. I think part of our outreach in April was we wanted to know what kind of adverse impact it was having on the neighbors, so we talked to many of the residents that were surrounding the off-campus area, and we heard that they're fed up with it, and that it does have an impact to them, and some of them even left because they knew that there was this reputation. And that's not what we want to see have happen either. So we're going to continue our efforts, and we're hoping that this just kind of fizzles out over time, that the college students just kind of realize, well, maybe this pub crawl attitude is we've outgrown it.
You know, it kind of reminds me just a little bit of spring break. And how, I mean, you've been around here for a lot of years. I'm a native of here, and I can remember as a teenager and young adult, you know, this city had quite a reputation for activity during spring break. I mean, I can remember Johnny Carson talking about it on The Tonight Show.
I remember that as well.
Yep, and now we're aging ourselves here for sure. But, you know, so much so to the point where the university changed the dates of spring break because it then coincided with St. Patrick's Day. Yeah. But I mean, I can remember cars being turned over and big garbage, those big roll-off containers being shoved down streets, and it was nuts, you know. And that helped change that a little bit. So, but just by changing the dates. But here, I don't know that you can really change. It's a different kind of beast here.
It's a different kind of thing. Although, you know, there are little incremental things that can be done, and the university has been a great partner with us. You know, even though it isn't just a university issue, they've taken a little bit of responsibility and ownership, and the attitudes are very collaborative to understanding this is a community issue and we need to work through it. And I do think that, you know, we're going to find that one thing like that makes a difference maybe, and you know, perhaps it's some of these kids being held accountable and having to pay fines and internal sanctions at school for them to mature a little bit and say, you know what, you know, I'm going to go visit Jake White and his group and have fun without the alcohol attachment to it.
Party.o.org. And as his efforts, you know, start to catch on more, you know, maybe that will help to chip away at some of the pub crawl mentality also. I want to talk about, you know, the types of crime that you're seeing in the city. I mean, obviously things like that keep you guys pretty busy 2 weeks out of the year, 2 weekends out of the year. But, okay, so we've had someone found this past week with a gunshot wound to the head. We had a fatality by homicide last month. That's not the norm, though, for Oshkosh at all. But what is kind of the norm? What types of serious crimes are we seeing right now?
Our most serious crime, you're right. I mean, the violent crime, which is, you know, generally the robberies, homicides, sexual assaults, are actually going down. I think there's been a trend nationwide too, where that violent crime is going down. Now, most recently, we're starting to see some uptick in that. The problem that we see from a violence standpoint are more of the aggravated batteries. We are concerned about some of the more recent street robberies that we've seen, but aggravated batteries, and that's at high-risk behavior, the intoxication level at bar time, fighting, disagreements, sometimes over things that are pretty silly. So we've seen a little uptick in that. More so, though, what we see most often are the property crimes, the residential and commercial burglaries. And so a little bit of an upswing in that. Those are, you know, sometimes concerning when some of those burglaries are occurring when people are home. But so that's more of the common. Of course, we've got some issues with retail theft and things along the, you know, the frontage roads with some of the businesses there. So the Part 1 index crimes are the ones that I just described. What we focus on as well, though, and sometimes the fear of crime, whether you're victimized or not, can sometimes be just as overwhelming as actually being victimized. So we spend a lot of time in our team policing effort and in our neighborhoods focusing on a lot of the quality of life issues that can be disruptive to a neighborhood. And what we're hearing right now is we've done our strategic planning to identify our priorities. What we hear first and foremost is the drug activity in neighborhoods and the speeding. We've been focusing a lot organizationally that officers' uncommitted time, when they're not answering the bad news radio and going on calls for service, that they focus on problem identification in their assigned neighborhoods and working with the community residents to resolve those problems. We've got a very active drug investigations going on all the time. As you know, when we started to see the uptick in heroin in our community and the overdoses go up right around 2010-11, I formed a drug task force within the Oshkosh Police Department. And so we have 4 officers that right now are doing nothing but working drug investigations and trying to reduce the impact of heroin and reduce the overdoses from heroin. We're finding information all the time from neighbors that are willing to finally give us drug information of things that have maybe been festering for a while, but because of our outreach, they're more willing to talk. So those are the things that are really most concerning to me, is those quality of life issues that may not result in a homicide or a robbery, but yet are the things that people develops fear to live in their neighborhoods.
Sure. You mentioned, people having thefts occurring from their homes while they're actually in their homes. Are these like robbery type situations, or are they considered more burglaries because the people don't know that they're happening?
Yeah.
Or are they strong-armed robberies?
Well, I think there's kind of a misconception or a misinterpretation of those offenses, and the media tends to get that messed up all the time.
Okay, I'm a member of the media, so let me have it.
I'm not necessarily picking on you, Cheryl, but this is something that my wife gets frustrated about, that I get frustrated about. A burglary really is the unlawful entry into a building or structure or some place like a home or a business without consent for the purpose of committing a crime.
And let me see if I have
Like
robbery.
theft or committing any kind of a crime that would be a result of burglary. Now, robbery is...
That's when there's a weapon involved, right?
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
Robbery would be, it's a person-on-person offense. Burglary, we tend to think of it as a property crime.
Okay.
A robbery is, I threaten you, whether I have a weapon or not, or I cause harm to you for the purpose of taking something from you, stealing from you. So I push you down, I point a gun at you, I want your wallet or your cell phone or something of that, that's a robbery.
Okay.
The threat or the use of force to take something or to cause injury. Where it gets, those are concerning enough. Where it gets even more concerning is when that burglary is occurring. We call them kind of home invasions. Burglaries occur while someone is there, and the potential of that confrontation now potentially turns it into a violent crime. And oftentimes what we're seeing is there's such desperation from the drug addict that they don't really care. I mean, they can't see the potential harm to themselves even by entering into a home. They just need drugs or the money and means to purchase their drugs. And when those start to escalate or occur, I mean, those are very concerning because of the potential harm to a citizen. We've had those. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of those. And those are those kinds of quality of life issues that we get concerned
Well, I'm
about.
glad to know I had the terminology pretty well straight.
You're pretty good.
So, but I'm also curious about, and I guess kind of surprised, really is probably the better word, about the definition of home invasion. I always thought of a home invasion as, it sounds horrific, like someone's barreling into your house with weapons and, a home invasion, but it really can be and is just as simple as someone entering your home where they've not been welcomed or asked to come in, and they're home.
Yeah, it's kind of a dramatized definition or word to kind of inflame it a little bit, I guess. We oftentimes will refer to the home invasion if there was a confrontation with a resident. It's not necessarily a legal term or a statutory term, but oftentimes you'll hear that home invasion terminology used with that when someone enters a home, confronts a resident, and you know their intent was to commit a burglary, but they surprised somebody.
So then strong-armed robbery is when there definitely is a weapon involved?
Nope. A strong arm would be,
I failed that one.
I've caused harm to you. You're walking down the street. I knock you down, steal your purse. I don't display a weapon. I don't threaten you with a weapon. That was a strong-armed robbery. No weapon was used.
Just as it sounds, an arm.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
That's right. If
All
a weapon is used, still a robbery, we refer to it as an armed robbery, and then there's penalty enhancers because a weapon was threatened or used during
Okay.
that.
Well, that one I have gotten wrong then over the years. And no one has ever corrected me, not an editor, not a police officer, not a police chief, not a district attorney. So I don't know what that means, but thank you for that, because, you know, I mean, you write these stories and you've got AP dictionaries, okay,
Sure, yeah.
Associated Press dictionaries that tell you what these things are, and sometimes the lines get a little bit blurred too, and you don't really, I don't know, but so I'm glad to know that.
Well, offenses can have multiple
Sure.
violations to it, so incidents can have multiple offenses.
Yeah. I want to talk about this command vehicle. I'm not really sure what its actual official name is, but it's a beautiful, big bus type thing that I most frequently see sitting out in the parking lot. What types of things, what's the official name for it? What types of things is it used for?
Well, thank you for asking. It's the Command and Community Outreach Vehicle. So we call it a CCOV, is the acronym for it. And I think that's a great example of a good public-private partnership where, you know, a third city money went into it, 2/3 private donations went in, that allowed us to really acquire this beautiful large vehicle as a multi-purpose vehicle. I've always had an interest and a goal to get a team policing vehicle, a vehicle that we could go from neighborhood to neighborhood to neighborhood in our outreach activities and further our cause of problem solving in neighborhoods. And this idea kind of grew into reality for us with the awesome help of the Oshkosh Community Foundation. So the CCOV's purpose is multi-purpose. First and foremost, the priority use of it is when we have critical incidents like the homicide, like some of the other things where we have to establish command and control and an incident command post, then we will roll that out as the operational hub for a command and control of a critical incident. And we'll staff it under the incident command system with all of the personnel that are needed to run a smooth operation. Secondly, it's used for all of our special events. I mean, we're a special event city. Oshkosh PD was involved in about 177 special events last year.
Wow.
And so the major ones where there's organizations involved in the operation of it, we'll set that up as a command post as well. Sergeant Harris will work out of that, and enhanced communication is always the element that leads to a successful operation. And so all the components of that special event will function out of that.
Okay.
What I get most excited about, and I think the community as well, is the third part of it. And I think really was the selling feature to the community getting behind this. And that was our outreach activity.
Okay.
So we will roll this into neighborhoods, either for active problem solving based on problems that they're having, or just to deliver our crime prevention outreach activities. So some of the neat things that we've done with this, and we've got a goal that the CCOV will be in at least 50% of the 151 defined neighborhoods, police-defined neighborhoods, by the end of the year. We're well on our way to doing that. In fact, you can track our activities on our website at www.oshkoshpd.com. There's a CCOV link.
We've been putting it up probably.
Yeah,
too.
with a map and pin maps that show where we are. But we've done things like if we're doing sex offender notices in a neighborhood, we'll hold community meetings with that neighborhood to say, this is what this offender's all about. here's some, you know, prevention and safety tips that you can do, and we've got some canned presentations. We do, you know, coffee with a cop or coffee with a chief. So we'll just roll up, advertise we're here, neighborhood, come out and talk to us. You know, meet the police officers that are assigned to your neighborhood. Let's see if we can identify how we can work together to, you know, enhance the quality of life in your neighborhood. To what I think so far is the neatest thing that we've done is we've got a good partnership with the school district. And, you know, they oftentimes are dealing with some behavioral issues in the classroom. But as a reward for student good behavior during the week, they get to come, we'll roll the C-Cub out to their school, and they get to come out and have lunch with the officers in the C-Cub.
Oh, that's neat.
Which is really cool.
Yeah,
so we'll roll it into parks, we'll roll it to schools, the Boys and Girls Club, wherever we can go to interact. And we've got some neat technology on board that helps us deliver our crime prevention messages, or whatever it is, internet safety, or whatever we're trying to teach. It's kind of a magnet. We roll it up and people just want to see what it is, and it's kind of an icebreaker for us to get to know people that maybe we wouldn't be able to meet. But I'm really excited about our use of that, and anxious to see what other kind of creative ideas. We actually had a citizen that came forward, gave us some money to put some video games on board. So we're researching what is the best appeal to kids that would help us kind of deliver our internet safety messaging, and at the same time do something fun that kind of breaks down the barriers with relating to youth, where they see officers as real people and normal people and fun people, and we can start our mentoring, you know, that way as kind of an opportunity to get them hooked a little bit.
Well, it's a beautiful vehicle, as you and I both have said, and so I guess if you see it out and about, you don't necessarily have to think, oh my God, what's going on in this neighborhood?
Right.
Because chances are it's a good thing,
it's a positive thing,
as opposed to a bad thing. And you know, the other thing that I like about it, Chief, is that it has the police department's slogan on it: "Know us before you need us."
Absolutely.
And I think that, you know, you and I have, you know, talked on this show a number of times. We've talked privately a number of times. And I just have such incredible respect for you. I really do. I think you've done a tremendous job in this community. And that's not to say anything about Chief Erickson, who was your predecessor, or anything like that, who I saw at a restaurant a few weeks ago. And I saw him, and I thought, wait, is that Dave Erickson? And sure enough, it was. So he's still around. But I just think, you know, you have started this team policing concept it came from your brain, and I don't know where you came up with the idea, but I think it has just been an absolutely tremendous, you know, thing for the community to have that concept in place. And so, who came up with the slogan, "Know us before you need us"?
Well, I thought of that.
All right.
It's kind of our mantra, and that's really it's the basis of what we do from a community policing standpoint, is you know, break down those kind of sterile barriers and get to know people before you need us. I mean, I think that says it all. We want to develop relationships ahead of time so we can build that trust, you have confidence in us, and we become more effective. I didn't invent, you know, community policing. That's hundreds of years ago, and Sir Robert Peel. But what we did was packaged it, and I hope to create a vision that says, all right, we're going to take the community policing concepts, mesh it with problem-oriented policing. We're going to call it team policing. We're going to maintain a districts concept. We're going to break those districts down into neighborhoods, and officers are going to have ownership in that. And that has been really effective, I believe, and the only way to police. And so what I brought in was kind of the vision of the philosophy and the structure, and said three things. We're going to become more community-oriented, we're going to become more problem-solving focused, and we're going to be more data-driven. And I think we've really been successful with that, and I appreciate your kind words.
Sure. And, you know, when you're just about at retirement time, I definitely want to do what we've done with other chiefs, and that's have you on the show and, you know, talk about, you know, all the good things that you've done and what you're going to be doing in the future. You know, maybe at that time or shortly thereafter have your successor on and talk about what he or she has. But I do hope that whoever they pick, that they will continue some of these things that you've done, because I think it's a positive all the way around for the community. You know, people have the ability to sign up for newsletters, not just for their own area, but for the entire city if they want, and really kind of see what's going on in any given area. And, you know, I've worked in the media for a lot of years, and, you know, there for a while, and not just in this community, but other cities that I covered, you know, the police would hold everything so close to the vest, you know, and, oh, we're not going to tell you that. And it would always irritate me because, oh, but you'll use the media when you want to get the word out about something. You know, it's kind of a double-edged sword in some ways, and I get it. I get how the police feel and that kind of thing. But, you know, you guys have made information so much more available than I think anyone ever has, and I think that's a good thing. It's good to know what's going on in your neighborhood.
Yes, and I appreciate that. And, you know, sometimes we fall and we don't do as good a job as we should. And, you know, recently we had an experience and we admitted that we could have done a better job. But that's all about our transparency and things. We, I think, have grown in our use of media and social media. And, you know, I think we understand that we can't police alone. We need the community in order to help us solve crimes and to be effective. And oftentimes the information that we've put out and the information we get back has helped us to identify suspects and have solved crimes. And I think when the community feels they're a part of it, our value goes up as well, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. Sure.
And, you know, you talk about social media. Our newspaper, whatever anyone's feeling about the newspaper is, they have streamlined over the years. They don't have nearly the number of reporters on, especially on the weekends, as they used to. Right. That's a fact, and that's not a slam against them. That's just the reality of our, you know, economic business times or whatever. And that's where social media comes really into play, because the Northwestern didn't have that homicide until pretty well after the fact, and yet social media had it. We've been putting up the website for the department. You guys have a Twitter page or something?
Right.
Okay, what is that?
Well, we're very present in Facebook and Twitter, and that's two avenues in social media to push out information instantaneously. Social media is a double-edged sword. Right. Sometimes where law enforcement sometimes at a scene of a major event likes to kind of control some information from a victim-centered approach sometimes too, and you know, everybody with a cell phone and a video camera is exposing some of that to the world. Sometimes it can be helpful, sometimes it can be harmful, in that, you know, we're not respecting the rights and the privacy of victims as well. And so law enforcement sometimes struggles with that. But I think more often than not, social media is used very positively, and it is a way to inform the public of hazards in the community and things that, you know, helps from a public safety standpoint too.
Sure. You know, we hear it, your slogan is, know us before you need us. We hear in the media a lot, if you see something, say something.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, maybe it should be, if you see or hear something, say something, because oftentimes we'll hear something. You know, one time I just heard something, it was on a weekend night, it was late at night. It sounded to me like a gunshot, you know, but I wasn't sure, and I just called the department and I said, you know, this may be absolutely nothing, but I heard what sounded like a gunshot. It's in this general area. I couldn't be any more specific from that, but at least it gave them something.
Right.
And, you know, if it turns out to be nothing, well, then it turns out to be nothing. But it could have been something.
Right.
And it's better to say something and it be nothing than to say nothing and have it be something big.
We would rather respond to something and find out it's easily explainable and there isn't a safety concern than what happens at times is there's a crime being committed, a burglary or something, and the person that heard it didn't want to get involved, and we could have made an apprehension or prevented a crime from occurring. And so absolutely, if you see or hear something, say something. We also use that as an opportunity to enhance customer service. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you hear something that sounds like a gunshot, call us. We'll check it out. But we should also be stopping in and telling you what we find or didn't find, calling you back or stopping back, so that you have peace of mind to know that, you know, it was explainable and you don't have to worry anymore.
We're almost out of time, Chief, but I just want to briefly go back and talk a little bit about this basketball game that was held.
Yeah.
It had to be rescheduled after the homicide, and it was held just this past Sunday, October 11th. And like I said, it was organized and sponsored by, in large part, Fit Oshkosh and the Oshkosh Black Citizens Community Group. And it did bring officers from your department together with minority youth in the community to help build some of those bridges. Again, know us before you need us. We're not necessarily bad people because we're cops. Do you want to expound on that just ever so slightly?
Yeah, and you were a part of helping us get together, and we've had a good long relationship for a while, working with Fit Oshkosh and Black Student Union and some of the black community groups here. That is so vital for, especially with some of the incidents that are happening across this country and some of the anti-law enforcement sentiment, that we understand our primary role is develop relationships with the community and in particularly the minority communities that are feeling a little disenfranchised or you know, unequal treatment kind of things. So we were absolutely on board when the idea was pitched, let's get into a basketball game. And I got to tell you, our officers had probably just as much fun as the kids seemed to be having.
It was a great time. You know, I was busy with other things. I didn't see much of the game. But boy, I saw everybody afterwards, and even our esteemed chief.
I was even out there.
You had a workout.
I switched a few shots myself.
Did you? All right, that's good. That's excellent. Yeah, it was a good time. It's something that I know they hope to have happen on an annual basis.
Yes.
And it is just a very important thing. We're almost out of time. I just want to make mention, you know, this show will air on cable TV after this event occurs, but if you happen to see it on YouTube before, there is the City of Oshkosh Police and Fire Commission on Monday evening, October 19th from 5 to 7 p.m. is hosting a listening session because the chief is retiring, and they want to hear what you have to say about what is important to you in a future chief, what things are important to you for a police department to do for you, and that kind of thing. So again, that's Monday, October 19th from 5 to 7 p.m. It's at the Oshkosh Senior Center, and it's in one of their large rooms called the Willow Room. You know, go and make your voice heard, and if you can't go, contact the Police and Fire Commission and let them know via email or phone. So I'm going to miss you, but I'm going to have you back on one time before you leave. So thanks very much for being here. And thanks to the crew and to all of you. We always appreciate your viewership and your input. So we will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl.